Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our monthly webinar series, Conversations on Character and the Common Good. This series is part of the Virtues and Vocations Initiative, a national forum that's housed at the Center for Social Concerns at the University of Notre Dame and supported by the Kern Family Foundation. I am Suzanne Shanahan, and I direct the Center for Social Concerns. I am also host for this series. Virtues and Vocations seeks to foster a community of practice amongst scholars and practitioners across disciplines who are keen to understand how best to cultivate character and moral purpose in higher education and the professions. This webinar series is one way we facilitate these conversations. Our conversation today will last till about 10:40, at which point we'll open it up for your questions. You can submit a question anytime through the Q&A mechanism, and I'll pose them directly toward the end of our conversation. And thus, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest for today's conversation, Ricardo Nuila, on Hope and Peril in American Medicine. Dr. Nuila is an internal medicine doctor in Houston and an associate professor at Baylor College of Medicine, where he also directs the Humanities, Expressions, and Arts Lab. In his own work, his experience as a doctor gives his writing its fuel. He focuses mostly on health disparities, how policies affect real people, and the interface between art and medicine. He's well known for his writing, including a recently published book, The People's Hospital. He's been awarded the inaugural Emerging Writers Award from the New England Review, and his work has been featured in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the New York Times, and the New England Journal of Medicine. Welcome, Ricardo.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm hoping we can have a fairly open-ended conversation, and I would love if you could start with your journey to your work there in Houston, your childhood background. Understand you come from a long line of physicians, so how did you get where you are?
Well, if you had told me years ago when I was applying to college that I was going to end up in Houston, I would have been the person who said, gosh, that's not where I want to end up. I was one of those Houstonians who grew up thinking I was going to live elsewhere. I came from a family of doctors, as my father is a doctor, my uncle, my grandfather. So I grew up with this sense of medicine as almost like the chosen path for me, but one of the things that I did, and I loved it. I loved going with my father to the hospital when I was a child, and even sitting in the doctor's lounge and waiting for him. It felt something special. I knew tangibly that what he was doing was doing something like helping people, and so I felt very passively going toward medicine. Couple of things happened. I would say that I started to notice that my father's experience of medicine was different as I got closer to college, and actually, as I was in college, as when I was a child, and in fact, I had it dawned on me when I was writing that book that American medicine really was changing. It was being shaped. There was something significant about my dad's experience of medicine. He became a little bit more burnt out. Just to give an example, he started his practice in Houston as an OB-GYN private practice with 2 employees other than himself. It was a receptionist and a nurse. But by the time I was applying for medical schools in college, he had multiple employees for his office, but 3 of them were dedicated full-time just to insurance claims. And there was this sense I just did not want to be a part of this transactional thing called medicine. I had gone from something special in the doctor's lounge that I experienced as a child to seeing American medicine as purely transactional. And it really dawned on me that if I was going to be a doctor in America, there was something, soul robbing about that. I don't know. I didn't feel like I could do patients good. I really felt like that. The other thing that happened, I have to say, was that I fell in love with literature. I fell in love with writing. I had a broad education, broad Jesuit education from high school going into college. and I became an English major, and I fell in love with writing, and it came to the point where I was like, if I don't know if I can not write. And I struggled very much to figure out how to put these two together. In my mind, medicine, literature really didn't go together. I had teachers who would say, well, it might help you with your patients, but that wasn't enough for me. I really wanted to write. I really wanted to write a book. And so honestly, the way that these things came together was just by just by because of the hospital that I trained at, the one that I write about in the book, the People's Hospital, Bentab Hospital, which is the public hospital. I grew up in Houston, in like I said, child of doctors, so I was in a bit of a bubble. I didn't know what the public hospital was. I came, I took years off between college and medical school, was trying to find something other than medicine, trying to find something other where I could have experiences, where I can afford a lifestyle to be a writer. I couldn't, came back to medicine, and then I found the public hospital where I saw all these people, all these stories that were untold, that I had never heard of. These people's struggles, not just tragedy, but also humor, also insight, also the beautiful parts of the world, and really became the fuel for my writing. And I realized that truly, the love of literature can be part of real healthcare, real delivery service to the patient, something that you cultivate. But that's how I ended up, and I've been there ever since. I have, like, I've not really been able to leave, because I really love the practice of medicine, where I practice it. I learn so much, and I feel like I give back. So it's very good for me.
Great. So, um, could you talk a little bit more about this particular medical facility? Because it's part of a broader network of things. It's a safety net hospital. Can you
Yeah.
give us a little context of what that is, how it fits in the broader ecosystem of the health system there, and what a safety net hospital actually is?
Yeah, it took me years to figure this out. Even when I was a medical student there, or resident, I only knew that patients who couldn't afford healthcare came here, and they somehow got healthcare. And I was really busy learning how to practice as a doctor. And sometimes, it does come up. How do we get patients the care that we know is available, but might not be available to them, but they can't access it because it's unaffordable. So what I found out is that it's a unique system. It's an interesting system. It is a public healthcare system in Houston, one that is funded by property taxes. So I'm a contributor now, as a property owner in Houston, to what's called the Harris Health, or the Harris County Hospital District. So this came about in one of the most incredible ways. This in the 1960s, Houston, as a city of the future. Imagine that in the 60s, the Houston was the eyes of the world were on it because of the Cold War. NASA was housed here, and the Russians had sent, Yuri Gagarin to space, and there was the space race, and so there was a lot of focus on Houston. And in that focus, what was found is that there was a huge health disparity for its citizens here in Houston. The African American population, the immigrants, they could only go to one hospital if they couldn't afford health care, and that was a charity hospital called Jefferson Davis Hospital. Now, I'm just gonna, of course, that is like that is the history of the South, right? And at that time, the only funders for this charity hospital were the city and the county, and each of them were trying to dump the funding onto the other. And so the conditions got even more worse and worse and worse. What happens is that one of the most remarkable people that I've read about, an author named Jan de Hartog. Now, this person was not just an author. He was a Nazi resistance fighter, a Dutch ship captain, playwright, was nominated for the Nobel Prize. Somebody thought he should win the Nobel Prize in literature, but he finds himself in Houston, Texas, as a creative writing instructor. He's also a Quaker, and as part of his identity of service to the community where he's coming, He says, I want to go volunteer in the community. What he finds when he comes to speak with people in Houston is the whisperings about this charity hospital, about the terrible conditions. The whisperings amongst the glitterati and the people who have money, the wealth here, is that the children in this hospital, the babies are crying throughout the night because there's a lack of milk, that there are staph infections roiling through the maternity wards, and there's children dying, that it's deplorable conditions. So he goes out and he volunteers there and he verifies this. He verifies it, and it lights a fire in him that he writes a series of op-eds that appear in the Houston Post and in the Houston Chronicle, the newspapers, about how deplorable the conditions are in a city that's supposed to be the city of the future, a city that he really loves, but he sees the problems with it. And this ends up becoming amalgamated into a book that he calls The Hospital. Very well written book. It was published in 1965. And what happens is that this becomes a civic issue in Houston, to the point where the voters vote to have a public healthcare system in this city to improve the conditions of that hospital and to create clinics so that people who can't afford healthcare can have something. So this system has grown over the last decades into one where there's two large hospitals, but there's also outlying clinics, specialty care. A person from Houston who doesn't who can't afford health insurance can still get health care in Houston if they are county residents and they go through the process of demonstrating that they're county residents. You don't have to be an American citizen or a resident. You just have to show that you live in the county and you have access to healthcare that's provided by some of the specialists that work in the Texas Medical Center, the largest medical center in the world, because some of those doctors who work in those other hospitals work at the public hospital. And that's what fascinated me about this system. I didn't know any of that history. All I knew as a person who was trying to figure out medicine and trying to figure out what my place in it was that, man, it felt like my patients actually really liked the care that they got. And the book is in many ways an investigation of why is this place really good? Is this place something that what does it do well? Why do people like it? What are its metrics? Can it be replicable? What does it tell us about the health system that we've accepted rotely in America?
So great. So you sort of brought us to the book, and if you could talk a little bit, what is it you're trying to do in the 5 stories you tell about patients? What's your overall goal in the book? What are you trying to share with the readers?
Well, honestly, when I started off the book, my only goal when I started off the book was to artistically render the lives of the patients that I saw. I wanted to paint the picture in a journalistic, also like in a way that mimicked the way that they actually lived, so that people could see what I saw at the hospital system, like the struggles that people have to go through in order to get something as some basic things, but also some very specialized things in healthcare. How this public system helped their lives, the drawbacks of the public system. I wanted them to see my daily like living in this system, which is like, is this, like I feel when I'm working in the hospital, I it just feels like thankfully we're able to help these people here because they have struggled outside, and it's medicine. It feels like medicine, and I mean, it's hard to. What I really want to say by that is that it's like that what I was talking about before. It's not that transactional side that one can feel is become American medicine, which is more of your job is like talking about insurance. It's more like, well, what's the research show? How do we apply it to this patient? So there's all of that feels that's what medicine feels like to me working at that hospital. And so that just was that was the kernel of like the book, was really to show that. Now, what I found out, was that I'm a novice writer, and I was like, I had to learn a lot. I was very naive in wanting only to depict the people, because there has to be connective tissue. It has to be something that American healthcare is so complex. Our society is so complex that you have to give grounds for why you think the way you think. And so it became an argument. Also, it became an argument to myself, to my heart, to the other people. It's like, why do I work here? This is the reason why I work here. There are reasons for it. There's argumentation, and so it over the years that I wrote it, it took maybe anywhere from 8 to 10 years to write this book. It really became, I kind of see it now as like a not to be too nerdy, but like a helix, like a double helix, where it's stories as one strand, and then argumentation on the other strand, wrapping around each other. Because I do think that to work there and to feel what you feel is an argument for changing the way that we do things right now in American healthcare.
Great. And I just want to share a quote that I really appreciated. You said, "That's what healthcare is at its best. It's what I see at Ben Taub. Science coming together with people. It's why I continue to believe in medicine. My faith comes full circle when I imagine myself through each of their eyes, and I realize I am one of them," which is just sort of one of the many beautiful points that you make about this double helix. Why aren't there more of these, right? Clearly,
Yeah.
this is something that's this relationship to this work that you're able to do there for you is empowering, it's transformative, it's meaningful. Why is this so rare, do you think?
I mean, I think the short answer is because there's so much to be gained from keeping it the way it is right now, which is that it's very profit driven. And the book is not a polemic to say that nothing should be profit driven. It's more to talk about nuance and where this pendulum swings between. And I would just, and I try to make it very, very, I try to dissect these ideas, but you can see in the history of American health how private health insurance what sprung private health insurance, what sprung the corporate, entry into American medicine, how fee for service became the rote way of billing in American healthcare, how hospitals went from what it means to be a nonprofit hospital, and how that's different from all of that history is really just showing us that the pendulum has really swung very, very far into the private realm, and the identity has changed of medicine. That identity that I felt in that my dad was going through is true. It is true and you ask doctors what they feel about that, and they will tell you, yes, there's something about the identity of medicine that has shifted toward the private side, which is like that, and the manifestation of that is filling out forms for insurance companies, and dealing with really profit, and how to parse that out. Okay, but what I was naive to was that there are places like Ben Taub Hospital, public systems, where American medicine can go back to its roots of really being I find liberty, for instance, in the practice of medicine, because I'm not dictated by insurance companies. I have a very special relationship with my patients, and I feel liberty to be able to act as a doctor, not under the regulations of insurance companies in the private world. That's one of the things that I find liberating about the public world. So I don't know, the reason why we don't have as many of these things is because it's so profitable to keep the private health insurance system with private hospitals, private doctors, and it's because those forces are constantly reinforcing themselves. We see the vertical integration of corporations in medicine. There was just a doctors group in Houston, Texas, named Kelsey Siebel Clinic that was sold to an insurance company. So now the corporations own doctor practices, they own part of the hospitals, they own part of the insurance, and so this is getting amalgamated into one body that is driven for that. My point is that pendulum has swung a little bit too far. We need to swing it back toward the public. There's something that the public side can offer, okay? And I think that it's a counterbalance to that.
So one of the things I find interesting in your story of how you came to be a doctor was the sort of early on in your life being really enamored by medicine, but then seeing the challenges of your father, and you became somewhat disaffected. And clearly you have found your place in medicine at Ben Taub, and are doing work that you find personally meaningful and fulfilling. Um, how do you think the profession of medicine is navigating the changes that you see, right? You know,
Yeah.
places like Notre Dame, students continue at huge numbers to come here and hope to go into the medical profession. Um, are those folks enamored with the bureaucracy of medicine, or what are the challenges that you see as people are coming up and being educated? Clearly, you found a special place, but it also seems like a rare place. Are people
Yeah.
different than you?
Well, I think there are great challenges, and I think that it's unfortunate that you don't. It's one of those experiences that you don't sense until you're in it. You know what that there is an idealized form when you go into healthcare. You get it's vague. You go into medical school and you get a sense of like helping patients, science, using your brain, good living, and everything. But it's this I don't want to say slippery slope, but there can, in certain cases, there is slippery slope that you when there's instructions from like, well, we want to bill at the highest level. That's a form of the slippery slope, you know, and a lot of times I feel like what I've found comforting was that I had a broad education to be able to interpret that and to be able to see what my space was in that. Because I think that the sciences teach you really great technical, you know, and granular thought. And I mean that with respect, very much like you, it's very difficult to do some of the job of medicine without that sort of lens of being able to be precise. But I think that the opposite side is constructing meaning over that and seeing where you fit into that world. And I think that that's one of the manifestations that we see right now in medicine is that without that basic education of the humanities, this ability to construct meaning, this is one of the reasons why burnout is such a big problem in healthcare. This is why we see the attrition rate of doctors. This is why you see people leaving the field. This is why, because really at the end of the day, the like in many jobs, what is being offered is like increased payments, you know, and so people kind of went in with this vague sense. I want to help people, and I do want to, you know, make a good living, but it's really like it's a mixture of things. But then by the end, by the time you get through it, you see that like that your everyday work is geared toward that one thing, and you haven't created that architecture
Mhm.
of meaning, which is that, well, I could have decided along the way, like maybe I could have worked for somebody else, maybe I could have divided my time in a different way. um it's all up to the individual to decide that, and that's why I think like medical education is starting to respond to that. You know, for instance, I like you mentioned, I direct the Humanities Expression and Arts Lab, which is a way to get to get humanities and arts into medical education for this very reason, so that we can have people at the bedside, but also, you know, introspectively making sort of these decisions based on like constructing meaning for their careers and for their communication with patients. And I think that I really believe that the arts and the humanities is the way to do that. So
So great. So you've jumped into the question of kind of medical education. So you were an English major, went to medical school, came in with strong interests in literature and writing. Um, if if we want people to engage more fulsomely with kind of the ethos of, you know, working with human suffering, working on
yeah.
healing, and developing that strong sense of meaning that clearly you've found, Are there particular things we should be doing as we prepare people before they get to medical school, when they're in medical school and in residency, to kind of find that meeting, to push off the burnout, um, and to kind of contribute to a better ethos of medical care more generally? What should we be doing?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is that human beings are social animals, and so the more that we can connect is the more that we build those structures to help ourselves combat that suffering, to accept and understand that suffering, to situate it, to know our role in it. That connection. That's why I ultimately am a doctor, is to connect with people. I see my job very simply as a way of problem solving with a person. And I know I have an expertise. The problem solving often comes within the medical slash scientific realm, but my job is there to problem solve in many regards. And that's one of the reasons I like the safety net hospital, which is that people, there's a lot of reasons why they can't afford healthcare. There's a lot of things that I can help them think through in order to get to the healthcare they need. It could be health wise, it could be regarding interactions with family members, how to get from point A to point B, things like that. I don't see that very different than me telling somebody that they need to be on a blood thinner, because I just want to be like useful and their guide like that. And I think that has given me grounding in meaning, because ultimately when somebody says, my Spanish speaking patients say muy amable, that tells me I've done job well done, and I can move on, and I can feel like that has been what I want. That's what I do this job for. I think that that's complex to construct that so that you have that within yourself as a physician or as a worker in our society in general. I think it involves an interplay of being able to communicate in a very specific way with people. So it means like recognition of language, and it means like having language in it. Also, literature is helpful because you automatically immerse yourself into the consciousness of that book writer, of that narrator, right? That's one of the most efficient ways to get into somebody's brain, I feel like, is literature. That's one of the reasons I love it. But I think that so many of these subjects have those opportunities on how to connect at the social level with people. And in doing so, when we do connect, I think that that's what helps us build that meaning for ourselves. And that's why I think that the medical, the Association of American Medical Colleges has recognized this. In December 2020, they released a paper that was called "The Fundamental Role of Arts and Humanities in Medical Education." Now, just to let you know, they don't just release papers willy-nilly. The ones before that were like the fundamental role of basic sciences, the
Mhm.
fundamental role of the social determinants of health. I mean, these were all kind of like the gravitas of these topics, and what it means to form a doctor, or somebody who's caring for somebody, or somebody who's problem solving, like I say, with a patient. So that the arts and humanities are there is it's really for a lot of reasons, for those reasons, to connect with people. What are the downstream effects of connecting with people? Well, yeah, there's going to be metrics like patient satisfaction scores. There's going to be length of stay. There's going to be all these things that once you're immersed in this world, you're going to see that they are like, these are the effects of those things. But there's also like personal thing. It's like, it's because of burnout in physicians. It's because a lot of physicians don't have this meaning. I have a one of the saddest emails that I get is when people like some colleagues say, "I don't see the meaning in what I do." I'm like, "You're a doc. You're even just by being around present, even by touching somebody, I feel like that is a communication to that person that I'm going to try to help you solve that problem." And it's just it's startling to me that people have lost the connection with knowing what they do and how important it is. So I think that all of those subjects are important to build the person so that you can be that person with a patient at the bedside.
So, as you look at the medical profession, and maybe more broadly in the Houston healthcare system. Do you think there are many people like you? So I love this line where you talk about right, right, your medicine is about connecting with people and your problem solving with people. I confess I have yet to have any medical experience, and I'm kind of old, where that was anything that I thought was happening in the exchange with the physician. Um,
Well, I think a lot of people go in with that, maybe not having said that clearly in their mind, but I think a lot of people have that inclination when they start. They want to, like, it's very simply put to, like, I want to help people. And that is a form of connection, you know? Maybe, there's an allure to the science. That's been like historical. The technological advances, there's an allure to it that you can be kind of like drawn to that. And so maybe in seeing it throughout your profession, you get drawn to that and you forget that this is really about connecting with people like you initially wanted to do. But I do think that, like, so many people go in with that sense of like, I just want to be able to, like, have a profession where I know I'm not doing anything bad, and I'm secure, and I'm using my brain. I think it comes down to a lot of that, like at the very, like, and there might be more decorated language on that, but that a lot of people go. I still believe that the vast majority of students that I see come in with that. Now the way that that medicine, unfurls, the way that people see medicine performed, I think can change them. I think that there's pressures. I think that there is there's peer pressures because, we have ultra competitive people in order to get to these spots, and we also, the way that we test people, it's like very multiple choice driven, which is like really at the end of the day kind of like stating that the world is black or white, and so you have to choose one way or the other. We don't encourage this tolerance for ambiguity. This is one of the reasons why these arts and humanities fields are starting to get immersed into it, because we've seen that decision making, that even the propensity to communicate with patients is influenced by, like, the thoughts that doctors and caretakers have. They will see the things as like, I either want to, cure the person, or I've failed. Well, there's a lot of gray there. There's a lot of gray in between. There's a lot of ways that if somebody has a terminal cancer, you can still make their lives much better. Okay, there's a lot of things that you can do, and we're trying to show people those shades of gray, and that is one of the things that I think that why in medical education is now embracing the arts and humanities, because that is one way to show all of this spectrum of different potentials within. So I think a lot of people go into medicine with that. I think that we're hopefully going to change it so that a lot of people retain that sense of helping people and connecting with people throughout medicine.
So, just on this sort of notion of retention. So, clearly you and others national are working on the integration of arts and humanities in really important ways. Um, but people jump into hospital or practice situations where they can bring some of that commitment to humanity with them, those tools and sort of resilient skills even. Um, and yet they're in a particular environment. How
Yeah,
do they maintain that, given the kinds of concerns you've raised about the kind of for-profit,
yeah.
medical Inc., um, sort of insurance challenges, billing challenges, the paperwork now that surrounds medicine? How do you kind of keep your eyes on what's important in those environments?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a hard question, but I would say that that's one of the reasons why, just to put it very simply, like, the attempt to know thyself helps, like that fundamental philosophical identity of like, well, this is what I tolerate, this is what I don't, so that you can push back and not make it so rote. You can push back and not make it so easy. You can ask questions. I think asking questions is one of the most vital things that somebody can do. I mean, you're in an environment where somebody who you have a patient who is not funded and you believe should stay in the hospital, but you have somebody overseeing you who says maybe you should get things moving. I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that can happen. First, you have to question yourself, am I thinking it well? Am I thinking this through? But then don't make it so easy for somebody. Just don't be a part of that system that says I'm gonna just do what that without thought, without thinking it, you know? Ask the questions, make it harder for the people on top of you, you know, so that they have to ask the people on top of them, you know. It's difficult. I'm not claiming that this is you know, this is simple, but that's the way to keep on to who you are, you know, to your beliefs, and to be an individual, because that's what I think at the end of the day patients want, is an individual with them at the bedside making these decisions. They don't, I mean, I think that's what I think a lot of patients want, you know, is that a human being understanding and trying to think through these things and helping them out, you know. So um, I think it's also, you can do a lot of different things in those environments. You can form groups to have like these discussions about policies, and well, this is how other groups do these things, and maybe if we push back on these ways, you know, there's that's the role of creativity. That's the role of creativity ultimately in when you're in, you know, when you feel like you've been pushed into a box, you find a way to push against the edges.
Great. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about this humanities expressions and arts lab? What are the kinds of things you do with students?
Yeah, so you know, this is what we do with students. We've founded a track that that medical students can take from day one of starting medical school, and it's longitudinal until graduation. And what it involves is different educational experiences, including you know, preclinical electives, but then clinical electives. We have one clinical elective that involves the students, you know, on the wards, and then in the evenings coming back with their experiences and trying to make it into like storytelling with that, you know, so that they can start to see how much of this is evident in their everyday lives, but also try to like take the creative part of them and start to put it together, you know. And I think that this is something for wellness. Okay, I did not, that's a very, you know, it's a buzzword in our society. It's certainly a buzzword in medical education. I did not go into creative writing thinking to myself, I need to do this in order to absorb these stories better. I need to do this so that I can feel, you know, it was truly like it was a conflict between like, how am I going to do these two disparate things? But I do believe that, you know, trying to write about these things helps me see things differently, and it helps me absorb these stories of suffering a lot more. I mean, some people ask me, how do you go through, so and the best example that I can give is that I feel like an actor in many times. What I mean to say by that is that I feel like I have a role to play for my patient, and I play that role, and that role is different for every patient. Some of them are more, like the role calls for like a little bit more numbers. Some of the roles call for a little bit more hand holding. Some of them call for like a little bit more direct, you know, so many different things. You get that from the sense of that person. But I feel like I play that role and then I leave, and I feel like I can kind of like separate my emotions from it. I don't bring my work home like as much as I feel other people do, and a lot of that has to do with just being able to express what I'm seeing on a daily basis in a way that's, I hope, is understandable to an audience. I think even just trying that, it doesn't have to be writing. It could be music. It could be in, you know, improv is another tool that's utilized. That's the sort of the fundaments of like this idea, is that it's not only just something for patients. It's not only helpful for the communication of patients so they get a better message. It's also, personally helpful. And so students in our program get a lot of those educational experience. Some of them can complete 4 years of this track and get a certificate. And we also host events, and we work with Rice University. We have a lecture series called Innovations, where we bring somebody who's like really speaking at the nexus of science and the arts, and in a way that illuminates something to those of us who are caring for patients.
Great. You also at one point mentioned that you teach an intercession class on narrative medicine. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because my understanding that's required of all students.
Yes, correct. So all students at Baylor College of Medicine must take the intercessions, and what it is that after their surgical rotation, they have 2 weeks where they're preparing for a test, and during those 2 weeks, they have two different courseworks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And the first in the morning is service learning. They go into community organizations, and they're actually working with different on projects with in different community organizations. And then the afternoon, they have it 1.5 hours with a student facilitator and a faculty facilitator, where they're discussing a work of literature or a work of art. And so they have around six. They have 6 of these sessions. We've cultivated like what are the works of literature. It's usually this like snippets. They're poems or snippets of short stories, something that can generate conversation. It's built around like themes and goals and objectives. And we also have a time where the students will meet these facilitators at one of our. We try to utilize the city as best as we can, and there's like the wonderful Manil collection here in Houston, which is one of the best deals of all time. It's a free museum. It has one of the biggest collections of Magritte and other surrealists, another one. He's not a surrealist, but other modern artists, and they have art interpretation. They discuss works of art, and again, these are helpful to help students understand, tolerate ambiguity. What we don't want you to do on the level of the wards is think that everything is black and white. We want you to believe that this is a world of gray, that that yes, labs could be wrong, actually, that the blood work, that the numbers you see, you have to piece them together with some of the factors for somebody's life, and all of those things weigh differently, and that comes from, I think, cultivating a discussion on abstract concepts like art. So that's what the intercessions is like 6 of those sessions, and it's been going on for many years. It was student driven. Students were the ones who said we want this, and got it passed by the administration, and so it's really a wonderful part of the school.
Fantastic. So I'm going to turn to some of the questions that are queuing up. You already talked a bit about burnout. One of the questions is, I'm a primary care physician nearing the end of my career. I'm very concerned about the widespread problem of burnout, wondering how we will attract more young people to enter our field and stay with it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
What do you suggest?
It's a great question, and I mean, I don't have a great answer for that, because it just feels like we're on a rocky boat. I feel you. I feel you that I also, I am at Baylor College of Medicine. We continue to see a lot of applications come in, but I am also seeing a lot of students who are like, have questions throughout their medical like careers. Do I do this? Do I leave? I think I think we need to really think in the way that healthcare is managed in this country. I think we're putting way too many bureaucratic responsibilities on doctors. Listen, I'm a person who, one of the things that I love about medicine is the responsibility of patients. I think I didn't fall in love with medicine until I found that responsibility with patients. So I'm not trying to skirt responsibility. I'm talking about bureaucratic responsibilities, like, and some of it is us reimagining things. So like I don't use, for instance, since I'm speaking with somebody who's a primary care doctor, I don't use the templates. I just write sentences for my notes. I do use certain templates that I've built myself, like that bring in labs and everything. But I keep really precious to myself being able to convey the story of this person, of this encounter, and I feel it helps me time wise, and it doesn't feel bureaucratic. And so I'm not trying to say that to pat myself on the back, only to give an example of like what the profession has to do to stretch what to reimagine what we think these bureaucratic tasks are pushed upon us, and also to push back on it. To say this is not something that we are not going to relinquish the history of the patient in the name of like checkbook, check marks and everything like that. I mean, those are just like a small example, but I think that that's what we need to keep people in it, to keep it human. And I'm worried about AI. I think that AI is like any tool, is going to have its pluses and minuses. It's going to make some of us lazier, and it's going to help some of us. But I think that my concern is that when the tool becomes the practice, and I'm worried that AI in medicine, that the practice of medicine will be AI, and it's not going to be the practice of medicine as one person with another. So I think that the more we keep it human, the more we veer toward this, that this is a personal interaction. I think ultimately that will attract more and more, because that's what a lot of people go into the field for.
That's great. And I think you also answered the next question, which was
Oh,
about
good.
artificial intelligence, which is great.
I love it. No.
Oh, way ahead of us. There's a quick question where somebody asked, you mentioned a paper talking about the fundamental role of the arts in medicine.
Yeah.
What is that?
Fundamental role of arts and humanities in medical education, and it's published by the AAMC. It came out in December 2020. It's the Association of American Medical Colleges that produced this report. Again, it's FRAHME, frame report, or fundamental role of arts and humanities in medical education.
Great. When you look at, oh, here's another one. As a safety net hospital like yours, have you seen an increase in the number of uninsured patients? Sort of, is there a new flurry of folks there? Has your hospital's capacity been stretched in recent years with challenges such as the pandemic, immigration,
Yeah.
and increasing healthcare costs for people elsewhere? Sort of, what are the challenges you're?
Yes, yes, oh, yes to all. And I mean, I will say right now, I think that I thought we might have been overstretched 3 years ago. We're even further beyond capacity right now, to the point where I feel it on a daily basis. It's hard. Uh, how do I put this? So during the COVID pandemic, I just want to Houston, I worked at the hospital in the COVID pandemic, and everywhere from the emergency room into the ICU. So I cared for patients in a very broad way, all, with COVID. And I felt like that the work was difficult but doable, and I was one of those people that felt fortunate to be able to go somewhere and not be in lockdown. I but and I know that that's tough. I know a lot of people suffer, but that's how I felt. Um, our deluge came after COVID, and it was interesting because I think that there were so many people who were not getting healthcare during COVID because of restrictions, because of a lot of things, that and they lost insurance, that their illnesses built up to the point where they just can't. And what we saw were patients who were even more complex than we were. I mean, again, I've only worked at the Safety Net Hospital in Houston, Texas, and Texas has been one of the states that has not expanded Medicaid. So Houston is one of the most uninsured cities in the country. It has been the most uninsured in different years. So we are used to the uninsured, but after COVID, it became even more complex, even more sick patients, and that's only continued to grow. So yes, the uninsured numbers going in. Part of that is immigration too. I mean, any everything is complex issues in our society. We have to recognize that these are all complex issues, but certainly, you know, we see in Houston, Texas, when there's an increase in the number of people, immigrants, we will see more of those people because a portion of them are going to have illness. But there's also, difficulties because of policy in Texas and how difficult it is for. So we've seen it. We've seen the growth of that, and it has manifested to the point where some of us are like, this is, I don't know how sustainable this is, So I don't. It's very hard. All I can say is that I'm proud that the voters of Harris County last November had a referendum on the vote. This is the first time that referendum came since the John DeHartog story that I said. But the first time that the voters they had an opportunity to give bonds in $2.7 billion worth of bonds to rebuild one of the county hospitals and add on to the hospital where I work, Bentop, and add outlying clinics. And it passed overwhelmingly. 75% of Houston voters voted for this. And so, what that tells me, is that, what, regardless of where you fit politically, there's agreement that healthcare needs to be fixed. That's one of the real sort of lessons in the country is that like Republicans and Democrats do believe and they agree in many ways. And what are the ways? We are just really like polarized because of the politicians and the politics, but it's not because not the topics necessarily. And it told me that we're gonna get to the point where we have more infrastructure, but we have to like organize things better, and it's been difficult, but at least we have that shining sort of like we like people believe in that that your city believes in what you're doing helps out quite a bit.
That's great. I was going to ask about the current attitude toward it. It's fantastic to hear that people voted so
Yeah.
enormously in favor of it. Next question. My question is about formation that doctors receive in medical school. Is there much of an emphasis on character of doctors, or most of it the focus on technical knowledge and skills?
That's a great
You talked about
question.
the arts. Where does character fit in all this?
That's a great question, and I think that I don't want to be too controversial and say it, but I think that when people have tried to talk about character, the word that has kind of subsumed that is professionalism,
Mhm.
and professionalism doesn't quite capture it. I think that the science, like medical and more science-driven fields, have a problem with the word moral character.
Mhm.
And I think that as a person who was educated by Jesuits and have like studied a lot since then and everything, I just find that to be so essential. Like, what is the moral character? And I I think that I'm lucky that I feel like I was grounded enough to educate myself. I knew what books to go from, and like how to go on there. But I don't think that, that's one of the things that I feel like we are responsible for in the humanities expression and arts life. We give like literature that is not trying to show, it's not a theology. I'm not trying to show one particular way, but I do think that we discuss what is the morally correct thing to do here. What is why? Why do we believe that? Would it be the same? And short stories, literature offer a way into that. Offer a way to discuss those things where it's like very hard for medical people. It's since the literature, since like the academics in the medical field really are like swayed toward like what is objective and everything like that, it's really hard to find like what's the moral ground here. But that's why I think another reason why arts and humanities are such a powerful tool, because we can utilize that to discuss these important topics.
Great. Thank you for that. One final question. With the rise of burnout, does there need to be an emphasis on self-care for doctors as well as patients? Thinking of mindfulness, there are, of course, many benefits for patients, but I'm thinking that there might be benefits for physicians as well. Do you think this
I
would lessen burnout?
I totally I do agree for sure. I think mindfulness can take a lot of different forms. I've I've looked at mindfulness in different ways for for different reasons, like including even Zen Buddhism and the mindfulness of meditation, yoga. All they can all be helpful if you amalgamate them within like a structure of like what what your personal beliefs are, you know to me it's like a pattern of things, a mosaic, and I put it together, and I think that the that mindfulness is very important. I think it's important for all of us in our society because of the distractibility from our attention. I think that what we're really contending with right now is that it's so hard to keep attention to things, and medicine is really one of those specialties that relies on attention. What I tell my students when we're rounding at the bedside, how if you're that patient and you see like a doctor on their phone, do you believe that there's this connection there? No, I don't think so. So I really make it, you have to give your attention to this patient because that's a communication that you are taking their illness seriously, that you're taking your thinking about how to help their illness seriously. And that's very important. So I think mindfulness is so important for to help us with attention.
Great. And so we're sort of rounding toward the end of this conversation. What's one thought that you want to leave us with? Something that we need to mull over as a society about the future of medicine?
I think that we should never throw in the towel. We should never feel like that we are all responsible for everything that's happening right now, and we are responsible through that because we're in democracy. Okay, so yeah, and it's a process. So it's not that just because we feel it right now doesn't mean that it has to happen right now, but we are all responsible for this. But there's something liberating about that. We can all do something about this. We can all in our if we think something is wrong with the way a patient is being treated, you can help that person right there, right then, in one way, and you can build toward building a structure in the longer process. Never relinquish this idea that we're thankfully in a society that gives us this power. Okay, but we have to believe that. We have to recognize it, and we have to believe it, and we have to grow into that.
That's fantastic. As you are speaking, I don't know if you're familiar with the sociologist Matt Desmond. He's
Oh
written a book
yes,
called
yeah.
Poverty by America, and I think very much your work is uh, really encouraging us to take collective responsibility for this, and I think that's fantastic. So
Well,
appreciate that
well,
message.
thank you so much. I met Matt Desmond, and he's a really great. And I was as a writer, I said to myself, wow, Matt Desmond is the LeBron James of nonfiction writing. So I just really I love that like to be even included in anything close to him.
Yeah,
So I
very much
appreciate that
so.
very much.
Well, thank you so much for spending the hour with us, and thanks for folks who are online. Please join us next month for Patience, Courage, and the Pursuit of Purpose with Professor Sarah Schnitker on March 25th. So thank you so much, Ricardo. This was great fun and learned so much from you.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I genuinely appreciate everybody's attention and time today. And thank you very much.